It's the middle of the week and time for Wednesday Read. Our Wednesday reading learning goal is to analyze a complex set of ideas or sequence of events and explain how those specific individuals, ideas, or events interact and develop over the course of that particular text, whether that be fiction or nonfiction. At the end of today's lesson, you'll be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4, a 4 being that you're able to bring together the ideas in terms of how they relate. This happens through connections made between ideas, people, or events. The conclusions you draw are logical and incorporate the ideas presented by the author. And finally, there is a meaning made in the sense that you apply the material to your own life. If you're at a 3, which is kind of where we want everyone to be by the end of these Wednesday readings, it means you're able to bring together ideas in terms of how they relate, and this happens through those connections made between ideas, people, or events, and the conclusions you draw are logical and incorporate the ideas presented by the author, but you might not be able to apply them to your own life. If you're at a 2, that means you're able to bring together the ideas in terms of how they relate, and this happens through those connections between ideas, people, and events, but you struggle to draw effective conclusions about the material. And if you're at a 1, that means that you can recognize the content in the material, but you struggle to see any relationships or draw any connections or draw any conclusions about them. So as you read today and complete this assignment, consider where you're at in your ability to accomplish that learning goal. All right, Wednesday reading, let's get to it. Welcome to another Wednesday reading fiction edition. Before we begin, I need to shoot out this quick reminder about inferencing. Inferencing is drawing conclusions based on information that has been implied rather than directly stated, and it's an essential skill in reading comprehension. People make inferences every day, both in oral and written communication. Many times, this is so automatic, most readers or listeners don't even realize that the information wasn't included in the conversation or the text. For example, my wife and I tried to pack light, but we made sure not to forget our bathing suits and sunblock. I wasn't sure if I would get seasick again, so I made sure to pack some medicine for upset stomachs. You can deduct a great deal of information from these sentences. That the author's married, that he and his wife are going on a trip, that they're going to be on a boat, that they will be around water, that they are going swimming, that they have gone swimming before, that the author has gotten seasick on a boat in the past. Inferences happen in that gap that you are leaping over, right? That logical leap. Where is that? What leap are we making? They happen in that space of unknown. Better yet, that space that goes unsaid. All right, and so here, we'll look specifically at a scene in To Kill a Mockingbird that provides an opposing perspective, against the grain maybe. It's a scene where the kids meet Dolphus Raymond. Before we read this, I feel like there needs to be a little background on the scene so that you have some context. Context is really important to you becoming a better reader, to have some understanding, to have a little bit of, this is why this is happening, right? So To Kill a Mockingbird is a story about a little girl named Scout. It's about a town wrestling with its past and its future. At this point in the story, Scout, who's 6, and her brother Jem, who is 8, snuck into a courtroom where their dad, a well-respected lawyer, is defending a black man against charges of assault against a white 19-year-old girl. The evidence of the case clearly points to her father, the girl's father, as the one who assaulted her. And then he blamed it on the black man, Tom Robinson. So the girl's father, Bob Ewell, assaulted his daughter and then tried to blame it on Tom Robinson. The facts of the case, the evidence of the case all suggests this. And Tom has to try to defend the black man against this claim that it was actually Tom. The story is set in the 1930s. This is a time post-slavery, right? Slavery ended in 1865, but only one generation really removed and firmly in the separate but equal time period. This manifested itself in blame of the black man, regardless of the evidence. This was sickening to both Jem and Scout because they saw the situation for what it was. They knew because their father was defending, and they could kind of, it was becoming clear. They could obviously see what the evidence
pointed to. Their father, the lawyer defending Tom, helped them see the world in a more mature way than the rest of the adults in the town. At one point, they leave the courtroom because they're so sickened by what they're seeing, the way that Tom Robinson's being cross-examined, the way that, this is all shaking out and sort of the comments and the feeling in the courtroom. They're just sickened by it. So they leave the courtroom to get some fresh air. And outside, they meet a guy named Dolphus Raymond. The meeting causes what's called cognitive dissonance for the kids, okay? Look up cognitive dissonance right now and post the definition in the box at the right. So you should have essentially come up with this. Mental discomfort that results from holding two conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes. People tend to seek consistency in their attitudes and perceptions, so this conflict causes feelings of unease or discomfort. You've probably felt this before. Maybe a friend, or someone you thought was a friend, turned out not to be. Maybe they were two-faced in some way. When things turn out not to be the way we thought they were, it hits us hard because we feel like we want to feel like we have confidence and control in the choices we make in our lives. Dolphus makes it clear for the kids, and more importantly for us as the audience, kind of the way adults think, right? He's going to kind of clarify for the kids a little bit of adult perspective and how really in some cases the children are more accepting than the adults, because the adults, while life experience tells us that they should be more mature and understanding all these things, we're sometimes not. An example of this is when he says, "You haven't seen this town, but all you got to do is step back into that courthouse." So how does the naivete factor, how does this kids being naive, right? This idea that kids are more naive than adults, how does that factor into this feeling that you haven't seen this town, but all you got to do is step back inside that courthouse? And in what ways are the children, Gem and Scout at 8 and 6, naive? So how does the naivete factor help them to be disgusted by this, what they're seeing in the courthouse, but yet the adults aren't leaving out of disgust? Why aren't the adults leaving out of disgust? Why are Gem and Scout as kids disgusted by the way that by the things that are being said and the way that people are being treated? Why does it disgust them but doesn't seem to disgust the adults? And then another quote that comes out in that PDF is, "I had a feeling I shouldn't be listening to the sinful man who had mixed children and didn't care who knew it, but he was fascinating." So what inference, remember, logical leap, can we make about their perception of people who have mixed children? And what inference, again, which is a logical leap, can we make about their perception of Dolphus Raymond? It shows up before we learn that he had mixed children. So they have a perception of Dolphus Raymond right from the get-go. I had a feeling I shouldn't be listening to this sinful man, right? They kind of knew. They had this idea of him. Like, it's our first time meeting him as readers, but it's not the first time maybe that the children of the town had met Dolphus Raymond. So it shows up, but their perception of Dolphus shows up before we learn about the fact that he has mixed children. How did that perception show up? Why does that exist? So what are the kids supposed to learn about the adults and the court case from Dolphus Raymond? All right, so what do they learn about Dolphus Raymond the longer they converse with him? And there's a specific quote that tells us why he fakes being drunk. What is it? You should have said, "I try to give him a reason, you see. It helps folks if they can latch onto a reason. When I come to town, which is seldom, if I weave a little and drink out of the sack, folks can say Dolphus Raymond's in the clutches of whiskey. That's why he won't change his ways. He can't help himself. That's why he lives the way he does." Remember that I told you that this meeting was cognitive dissonance for the kids. How does Dolphus Raymond help create cognitive dissonance? All right, on to sort of the main idea and identifying evidence here. What do you think the main idea for the assignment is? What do you think is the main idea in this scene? And the main idea isn't just like a shot in the dark, not just like the author lifts your head up and drops this information in your brain and closes you back up and suddenly you get it. right? Harper Lee was intentional when creating this character and this conversation. Something was said, a realization happened for the characters. When the characters have a realization, like they do, we are supposed to as well, as readers, right? How did the realization we came to help support the main idea, the purpose of Dolphus Raymond's existence in the story? So how did the realization that we came to, and by extension the characters, or the characters by and then us by extension, help to support the main idea that you supposed? All right, you've answered all of the questions. The last thing we have for you is the learning scale. And now that you have answered all of your questions for today's lesson, let's take a look at our learning scale. Where, according to the scale, would you rate your ability to accomplish the learning goal listed at the top there? Once you give me a number, please explain why you rated yourself as you did. Doing so is your last assignment for this lesson. You have earned your unit. Thank you. So I'd like to take a second here as we close this video to talk about your rating, where you put yourself on the learning scale. Remember that the goal is to get everyone to a 3 by the end of the year. You know, if you're at a 4, that's great. But again, honesty is the best policy. If you're at a 1 or a 2, that's fine. But the more that we kind of do this, my hope is that you get to a 3. And I'll talk about a little bit what happened in today's lesson that should help you understand, kind of place yourself and what it would mean to be at a 3. So if a 3 means that you're able to bring together ideas in terms of how they relate, this happens through connections made between ideas, people, and events. The conclusions you draw are logical and incorporate the idea presented by the author. So we've got a couple ideas here. This is kind of one that is very easy to lay out between one idea and another, right? Idea 1 is Dolphus is a fake drunk, because being in the clutches of whiskey is more socially acceptable than having mixed children, right? But he's got mixed children. So he, as the quote says, gives them a reason, right? And idea 2 is that the children are naive, but really they're not. They see things with a lot more clarity than most of the adults in the town, because we assume that adults have this good head on their shoulders, right? That they're the ones able to keep everything in perspective and to have sort of a moral compass. But really, as we've looked at the facts of this case that I kind of laid out in the beginning of this video, they're not. It's quite clear who's guilty here, and it's Bob Ewell. It's not Tom Robinson. But because Tom Robinson is black, he's going to get convicted because it's the 1930s and we're one generation away from slavery, and there's still a lot of animosity there. So those are 2 ideas, right? That the children are naive and that Dolphus is a fake drunk to keep society off his back for having mixed children, because the comments and the whispers and the rumors about someone having mixed children is worse than somebody being a stumbling drunk. And if our learning goal, again, is to bring together ideas in terms of how they relate, this happens through connections made between ideas, people, and events. These conclusions are logical and incorporate the idea presented by the author, right? That's our learning goal. So it would be my hope that for you to rate yourself at a 3, you were able to see that Dolphus helps Jem and Scout understand that adults are susceptible to stereotypes and mob rule, right? Atticus is an exception to that rule, and that's why the kids have the perspective that they do, because he's their father, and they see things differently. Atticus has a different level of respect. He's a lawyer, but he could have easily just said, "No, I'm not defending this man," right? But he was like, "No, this has to change. I need to defend him." So they have this perspective because Atticus is their father. And all you have to do is step back inside that courthouse, right? To see that he's different than everybody else in there, everyone else in the town. Everyone else in the town, including the jury, says that Tom is guilty. But Atticus is like, we got to defend this. Even though we're going to lose, we have to point it out. We have to make it obvious. The cognitive dissonance of Dolphus This idea that it's easier to be a drunk than it is to be a father of mixed children, as far as society's perception goes. This idea of cognitive dissonance of Dolphus, choosing one evil over a less acceptable evil, helps them to illustrate how people are. They're both sort of seeing people in a new light, and it's being made clear to them through Dolphus's example as well. So if you're able to kind of draw those conclusions, to make those connections, then you're at a 3. A 4 means that you're able to apply this to your own life, and if you can do that, great. But that is way too specific for me to like lay out ideas for you. If you can make those connections and explain that in detail, that's wonderful. But if you're somewhere at a 1 or a 2 and you're trying to get to a 3, what I just explained here would be what it takes to be at a 3.